We're learning Tanya. Now, technically, we're ready to start Perek Yud Ches. That's what we're holding. Pachot Oyoter. Technically, we're holding Yud Ches. But I want to say one more thing about Perek Yud Zayin. When I prepare the classes on Sunday, when I prepare the classes, what I do often is I go back and I listen to what I said the week before to see what I taught, to see what I didn't teach. There's one thing from last Perek that's very, very important for me to still clarify. We talked about it, but I want to make it very, very clear. If you were here last Sunday, the topic that dominated the class was the definition of the term Rasha Be'emes. The Rabbi uses an expression, like Mishu Rasha Be'emes. There's a Rasha and there's a Rasha Be'emes. It's like Rasha Be'emes. So you could translate Rasha Be'emes, one Aveda, like it says in Tanya. You could translate Rasha Be'emes, Rasha Gomor, like it says in some of the Mefarshim. And the Rebbe doesn't say either of those pshatim. The Rebbe comes up with a very sweet middle. The Rebbe titles Rasha Be'emes, a person that because of Avedis has lost control. Rishoyim Heimber, a person who because of his earlier Avedis has lost control going forward. It could be one Aveda, it could be 10 Avedis, it's someplace in between. Rasha Be'emes means a person who's fallen into Maimed HaMatzah Rishoyim Heimber Shus Libo. This was the idea that we presented last week. If you were here last week, I pointed out that I was correcting myself. I had said the wrong pshat, or at least I said different than what the Rebbe says. But I wanted to fix it, and that's what we did last week. What do we say about a Rasha Be'emes? A Rasha Be'emes cannot be a Beinani that's in the Maimed HaMatzah of Meyach Shalt Al Alev. What's a Beinani? A Beinani is a person, ultimately a Beinani is a person that Le'ovav Le'yavet. A Beinani is a person who doesn't do any Avedis. And based on where he's standing right now, he's never going to do an Aveda. Right? Lo Yavid. You cannot know for sure a person's future, but a Beinani at the Taich, if he will continue to be what he is right now, not only has he never done an Aveda, he won't do an Aveda in the future. That's a Beinani. How does a person become a Beinani? There's different techniques. One of the techniques of becoming a Beinani is Meyach Shalt Al Alev. He uses his mind to arouse his heart. So the Alter Rebbe was Machadish, very important Chiddush, that in Meyach Shalt Al Alev there's Madreges. One person's Meyach Shalt Al Alev, he uses his mind to arouse his heart, that he has a real love of Yid. He feels in his heart a love and fear of HaKadosh Baruch. A person who has a Meyach Shalt Al Alev, who has real love of Yida, is called Avodah Tama. It's the highest Madrega of Beinani. But not everybody is capable of this. Some people have minds, they can learn. They have minds, they can think. But they don't have a sufficient heart to feel. They don't have the Regesh Halev the way they're supposed to. So the Alter Rebbe introduced us to an idea which we called in Yiddish Abyssal Yiddish Ahatz. Abyssal Yiddish Ahatz. Abyssal Yiddish Ahatz is based on the story which I've told so many times. Even if I don't feel the Eibishter completely, I feel him enough to control my Yetzer Hara. Or the way the Alter Rebbe teaches the Pasuk. Ki karev elecha hadava ma'oid beficha. It's near to a person, beficha he teaches, to learn Teda. Ubelvavcha la'aseis. To have enough left, to have enough heart, to have enough emotion to control action. So even if a person does not have full Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem, he doesn't have a state of where he's excited about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, mamish with Ava v'Yira, love and fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If he has B'Vavcha La'aseisei, enough Yiddish Ahat, enough emotion, enough of a good feeling in his heart, what he called the Perek Zayin Machshavatim, to affect his action, that's enough. A person can be a Beinani, ki karev elach hadava ma'ed beficha. If you have a mind, you could learn, you could think. You can create sufficient midah shabalev, sufficient feelings to control your actions. That's also a Beinani. Now here is the $1 million question. If a person did Avedis, and he didn't do tshuva for those Avedis, can he be a Beinani, or does he have to do tshuva for the Avedis from before first? So the Alter Rebbe answers, if he's a Rasha Be'emes, a Rasha Be'emes means I don't know how many Avedas he did. But he did Avedas in the kind of way that he lost control over his heart. Mishu Rosha Be'emes, a person did Avedas. But he did the Avedas in the kind of way that going forward he lost control over his heart. The Alter Rebbe says, Mishu Rosha Be'emes can't be a Benyani. If a person does one Aveda, you can maybe be a Benyani going forward. But a person is a Rosha Be'emes, means to say that a person did enough Avedas that he lost his chush, that he lost his feel, that he lost his sense of edelkeit, nesa, to be a Beinani, cannot be a Beinani anymore, unless he does tshuva. And this is why I'm repeating. The reason I'm repeating last week's class is because I told you last week that I'm moving on to Yotchas, and I intend on doing so. I'm going to do so momentarily, B'ez Hashem. But I want to review this, I want to make this point. The Alter Rebbe says, here's the vart. I mean, again, the Nekudas Adover is, if a person has Avedas from his past, does he have to first do tshuva, and then he can be a Beinani, or can he be a Beinani right away? And the answer is it depends. It depends on a lot of things. It depends on the nature of his Beinani, and depends on the nature of his Avedas. If a person is a Rasha B'yemes, which means a person did so many Avedas that he lost his chush, he lost his feel, then you have to get the feel back. And this is why the Alter Rebbe says in Perek Yud Zayin, you cannot be a Beinani in Layase Tshuva al ha'ovar tchila. A person has to do tshuva for his past first. And this is what I wish to talk about today. Why is it that a person who did Avedas yesterday cannot be a Beinani until he does tshuva al ha'ovar tchila? And then there's a second idea. I'm going to explain this to you momentarily, that it's enough tshuva tator. I'm going to explain to you momentarily. But let me start from the beginning. Let me give you an aleph beis. It's not comfortable to talk about Avedas. You know, it's not comfortable to talk about Avedas. You know why it's not comfortable to talk about Avedas? Because you talk about Avedas, you almost feel like there's a mirror in front of you. You understand? When the Alter Rebbe talked about Avedas, he talked about somebody else's Avedas. I'm sure it wasn't Gishmak. But when Anoshim Kelkeinu, it's not as a Gishmak. But you got it. You have to learn this Tanya. And Tanya Sefer of Musa, Sefer of Avedas Hashem. One of the things which the Tanya says about Avedas, which is very, very, very important, in the Lashon HaGemorah is Milafafte. It's Lashon HaGemorah, Milafafte. Milafafte. It surrounds the person. As Vikkel the Mensch, surrounds the person. The Alter Rebbe's expression is Aveinesechem avdilim beinechem lebein elekechem. It's a pasuk. Aveinesechem avdilim beinechem lebein elekechem. That an Aveda is a wall between a person and the Eibishter. Aveinesechem, your sins. Mavdilim are a separation. Beinechem with you, bein elekechem, and your God. So Chassidus teaches. Aveinesechem avdilim, an Aveda separates beinechem between you, bein elekechem. Und der Lekus was is in euch. Elekecha means your own godliness. Not an oven, a sin is a wall between a person and the Eibishter. A sin is a wall between a person and the Eibishter, which is inside the human being. What's the pshat of this? The pshat is it's a simple psychological idea. It's a simple psychology. The emes is a simple psychology, but it's a very, very, very important psychology. And the psychology is this: if a person does things in which is bad, it's not good. Avedas Tom and Ishtal. You're not allowed Avedas. Finish. You're not allowed Avedas. And Aveda is not good. For Aveda you have to do tshuva. But there's a concept which is mentioned in Tanya against that tshuva. It's one thing to do an Aveda. It's another to become a slave to the Aveda. A person does one Aveda one time, he did something bad, he has to do tshuva for it. He probably feels terrible, and he does tshuva, mitzvah, nafshi, he won't do it anymore. Sometimes a person does an Aveda more than once. The same Aveda more than once. And more than twice. If a person does an Aveda the first time, he feels terrible. He does Aveda the second time, he feels bad. He does Aveda the third time, he doesn't feel as bad. Until you have a Maimedu Matziv. I heard it from one of my Rashi Yeshiva. He calls it the heter of Rav Huna. The heter. So zeh weit von der heter. Rav Huna says, I'm not saying the right word in the Gemara. If you do something bad, you feel terrible. If you do something bad many times, you don't feel that it's bad anymore. This is called in Derech Hayim, in the middle of Rebbe's Chassidus, this is called Prikasol. This Kabbalah said. Kabbalah Sol means a person accepts the yoke of heaven. Prikasol means the person has thrown off the yoke. Prikasol, the way Prikasol is explained practically is that van Alosh in the middle of Rebbe's Chassidus, a mensch tut an Aveda, farvos nit. He does an Aveda, why not? Usually a person needs a reason. In other words, Prikasol means a person has done something wrong so many times that he's lost control. A person decides, today I'm not going to do a certain Aveda, but because the person is in the habit of doing that Aveda many times, he was paid a kale. He threw off the yoke, and he lost control over himself. That doesn't happen from doing an Aveda once, it doesn't happen from doing an Aveda twice. It happens from doing an Aveda Kama Pa'omim until you lose your chush, you lose the edelkeit that says that this is wrong. You lose the edelkeit that says that this is inappropriate. You lose the edelkeit that says that this is disgusting. You could lose your chush. That's called prikasol. You throw off the yoke. This happens when a person does an Aveda many times. To say this in different words, say this in less disturbing words, this is called hergelus ra, bad habits, which is something that the cloud people know, but in America, America is a land that's called by America itself a land of consumerism. You want to chaparayim as much gashmis as possible. And in that exercise, the chaparayim as much gashmis as possible, people diminish themselves. They develop bad habits. What's such a bad habit? Again, I'm going to give you a benign dugma. I'm going to give you a part of it dugma. But this part of a dugma applies also to Inyonim Roim, yeah? A person eats too much. A person eats too quickly. It's not good. It's not healthy. A person's supposed to eat slowly. Because if you eat too quickly, you eat too much. Yeah. If you eat slowly, you eat only what you're supposed to eat. Sometimes, as the expression is in Yiddish, sometimes people eat with their eyes. They see the food and they eat and they so if a person eats too much, it's not good. But if a person eats too much always, this becomes them. It's called a bad habit. A bad habit is very hard to change. It's not only hard to change because it's wrong and because you desire it, but because you've allowed yourself to become the bad habit. When a person becomes a bad habit, he's not just fighting with what's wrong, he's fighting with the fact that it's a regilus ra. It's become a bad habit. Bad habits they're very common. Well, people have all kinds of bad habits. And the bad habits are very difficult. When I teach teenagers, the bad habit that I talk about is staying up late at night. You stay up late at night one time, so you're tired the next day. But teenagers have a tendency, this is one of them in Hagen, they teach them in camp, how to stay up all night, nacht, and they walk around chicken. A person who develops the bad habit, it's 10 o'clock at night, and I have one more thing to do. And then I take a blink, it's 1:45 and I haven't done it yet. We gang in the Zeit. The fact of life is that when a person is tired, they have less self-control. When a person is tired, he has less self-control. So what's a person supposed to do? He says, I know I'm tired. I know I have very little self-control, so I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. I'm going to get into bed. What happens? Your roommate walks in. And you say, I'm only going to talk to her for 5 minutes. And then it's 2 hours later and the 5 minutes are not up yet. The first time it happens, you're doing it on purpose. After you do this 100 times, this becomes you. It's called a regilus ra. And these kids have to learn when life hits, when they're not in school, that it's okay to come to school, the brain isn't working. But they have to take care of their children or their husbands, or they have work to do, and they need a clutter cup. To unlearn this bad habit of going to 10 o'clock at night, I have to just finish chitas and brush my teeth and say krishma. But by the time they finish those 3 things, it's 2 a.m. because they departed the Zeit. It becomes a regilus ra, a bad habit. To undo a bad habit is very hard. Because you're not just fighting against the taiva, you're fighting against the chalishas. You're not just fighting against what's wrong, you're fighting about the fact that you've allowed that bad thing to become you. That's the meaning of this statement. Every Yid has a lakus inside of himself. The emes is, it says in Tanya, that the idea that a person has a lakus inside of himself is even a teva. It's a nature. Which means it's even mitzad the nefesh habamis. I've talked this to you so many times. It's such an important few shudas, the beginning of Perek Ches in Tanya. The Alter Rebbe says that a Yiddish Yetzer Hara is called a Shed Mished in Yehudayin. A Goyish Yetzer Hara is called Shed Mished in Nechroin. I'll translate it in English. A Jewish Yetzer Hara is called a Jewish demon. That's a Shed. It's a Ruach. It's a spirit. It has no substance, but it's a Jewish spirit. A Goy Lahagla Shed Mished in Nechroin. Nechroim, the word Nochri really means it's foreign, a fremde. The touch Nochri doesn't mean a Goy. Nochri means not recognized, fremd. So the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, the Yiddish Yetzer Hara is a Yiddish Yetzer Hara, the Yiddish Yetzer Hara. Devarim Amutarim, permitted Taivis, he very much desires. He's an Nefesh Habamis. He's a Yetzer Hara. Averis are Hepech, the Teva of the Nefesh Habamis. The Alter Rebbe says in Tanya that Averis are against the nature of the animal soul. So the Rebbe Rashab asks in the beginning of the second Maim of Kuntas Amayim, if a person's Yetzer Hara, his Nefesh Habamis, doesn't want to do an Averis, how does a person do an Aveda? So the Rebbe Rashab answers based on the Gemara slowly. You have to learn how to do an Aveda. Rachmana litzlan. Hayei memele say kach. Lamachar memele say kach. First you do one thing which is permitted. But then it's not necessary. Then you do another thing which is permitted. And you lose your chush. You lose your feeling ruchnius. And a person can lose his feeling ruchnius at kedei kach that he not only slips in Dvarim HaMutarim and things that are allowed, the person could, God forbid, slip also into the arena, into the space, into the parameter that's called Rachmana litzlan Dvarim Asur, prohibited things. That's the pshat in this pasuk. Rabbi says it in Tanya in a few places. A person doesn't have Aveda, it's a terrible thing. But when an Aveda becomes a mechitze, an Aveda becomes a wall between me and Elokus, that's not just an Aveda. That's an Aveda that has taken away from me my Yiddish chush. Now the implication of the Rebbe in this Perek, when he defines Rasha be'emes, it doesn't happen from one. You do an Aveda one time, you still have your chush. If you do an Aveda a number of times, the same Aveda, a number of times, a person, I hate to use the expression, there's doing an Aveda and there's a Bal Aveda. You fall into a Maimed Matzev, where you call the Rosh Hashanah, you have no chush, you don't feel anymore. When I was in Yeshiva, Rabbi L'chaim used to teach Tanya. In the 3 years I was in Alter, he probably went to the Tanya 4 times. He would read a Thursday night in a half an hour, 2-3 prakim. So I remember how he would teach. And he gets a tshuva Perek Gimel. The Alter Rebbe brings a Zoya. That the Zoya says a person doesn't have Aveda once, he makes a kesem, makes a mark on the neshama. He doesn't have Aveda 2 times, he makes another kesem on the neshama. He doesn't have Aveda 3 times, mispashit. Who kissed mommy, sitra da. The Aveda is not it surrounds the whole neshama. The implication of the Alter Rebbe is when you do an Aveda 3 times, and maybe it's not 3 times, but 3 represents a certain idea. It's not just that I've done something wrong, I lose my feel. And that's what the Alter Rebbe says here. There is a concept of moyach shalt al alev. There's a concept of moyach shalt al alev. The mind can rule over the heart. And the concept of moyach shalt al alev has madreges. Some people can experience moyach shalt al alev with the avas Hashem, and the yiras Hashem is bizgal, fully expressed. If a person has moyach shalt al alev, whereas avas Hashem is fully expressed, such a person is called avoida tamal benyani. He's a perfect benyani, he's a complete benyani. And I would imagine that such a person can always control. If you have avas Hashem and yiras Hashem, you can control your Yetzer Hara. But there's also another kind of moyach shalt al alev. A person is using his mind to arouse his heart, but he's not achieving full avas Hashem and yiras Hashem. He's achieving only what we call abisela Yiddish ahatz. He's achieving only that he has a feeling towards the Eibishter of warmth, of positivity, of a desire. But the Regesh Halev, full emotions, he doesn't have. So Alter Rebbe says, Karei v'nokil. I told this to you so many times. It's the only place in Tanya that I know. And tomorrow someone's going to come and show me someplace else. I'm always learning new things. I make all of these statements, the people are always correcting me. It says a person who has a moyach, There's a brain that works. He could learn. Moyach b'kadid, kop adit. Not everybody has a moyach b'kadid. Don't kill yourself. The person has a functional brain. And not only has a brain, he could learn and he could think. And he could learn and he could think to develop enough feelings in his heart that should allow him to control his Yetzer Hara. That's enough. That's a beinoni. Why? We live in a world of action. We live in a world where the only thing that matters, like if I control my action, I'm a good Jew. If a person has a good feeling in his heart, which is enough to manage his ma'aseh, Paltiel is enough to manage his actions, that's good enough. Says Alter Rebbe, however, you could lose that ability. If the Eibusher gave you a brain, you could learn. The Eibusher gave you a brain that you could think and meditate. These are two different things. Learning requires a mind. Concentration and focus requires more of a mind. The Eibusher gave so-and-so a mind, he can learn. The Eibusher gave so-and-so a mind, he can meditate. But when it comes to Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem, he has only a little bit of Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem. So that such a person can lose the ability of Moyach Shalta Alev. The chush of Moyach Shalta Alev presumes a certain edelkeit. The ability for a person to use his mind, to learn and to think, to develop feelings that can affect his behavior, assumes that there's a certain refinement. What's the refinement? That an Aveda is not good. But a Rosh Emes has lost that refinement. It's a definition of a Rosh Emes. The Taich of a Rosh Emes doesn't mean I did only one Aveda. The Taich of a Rosh Emes means a person did whatever it is, one Aveda many times, or many Avedas to such an extent that he's crossed over into this space, which the Chazal call Heim B'Reshus Liba. His heart has taken control over him. Which basically means he's a Baal Taiva. Baal Taiva means, he has, Taiva, I always tell you this, Taiva means weakness. The meaning of the word Taiva means Shvachkeit. When a person has weakness and he cannot control himself, that's a Baal Taiva. A person has desires and he doesn't give in to them, he's not a Baal Taiva, he's a person. When a person has weaknesses and he gives in to his weaknesses, and he gives in to his weaknesses so much that now he finds himself in a matzav that even if he tells himself, I don't want to do this, he cannot control himself. This is called a Rosh Emes. A Rosh Emes means a person who, because he's done an Aveda more than once, finds himself in a Ma'amid Matzav, he finds himself in a condition. He says to himself, today we're not doing this, and he doesn't. Now you just said you're not going to do it, why do you do it? And the real answer is because he's lost control. He's lost control. You don't lose control from doing an Aveda once. A person loses control from a bad habit, from a hergelra. A person loses control from doing the Aveda again and again and again. And this is the pshat in the pasuk. An Aveda is a wall between the Yid and the Eibishter. And again, the way we're learning it now, not every Aveda is a wall between Yid and the Eibishter. And for every Aveda, a person has to do tshuva. But we're talking about here is specifically a person who's done an Aveda to the extent that in this area he has no balabah, he has no control over himself, and he needs to do tshuva. Or to say it in a more worldly language, right? There's a very big difference between a person who has a weakness and a person who has an addiction. Now there's a whole debate whether Torah agrees with the word addiction, right? How do they use the word addiction in America? It's almost a heter. You know what the word addiction means? I'm sick. Now, if a person is sick, he should go to a doctor and he should be healed. But a lot of people use the word I'm sick and they want to try somebody saying, don't blame me. It's not my fault. I'm sick. I've heard people say that. You can use an addiction as an explanation why it's not your fault. So I've heard vikuach amongst Anshe Machshava, Jewish theologians, Jewish thinkers, whether the word addiction is acceptable al pitera. Why? The Eibush gave us free will. That a person could be a tzaddik like Moshe Rabbeinu, he can be a rasha like Bilam a rasha, and any person can reach the highest madrega of tzaddik and the lowest madrega of rasha. The Rambam writes in Nechus Tshuva. So the word addiction, which is so common in the culture today, Which means in one area of my life, one person it's alcohol, for another person it's drugs. Rahman al-Islam, these are not small things. For another person it's gambling, for another person it's lashon hara, for another person it's overeating. There's no shortage of addictions. But they call 12-step programs. An addiction means that when it comes to me and this thing, I'm not a balabais. When it comes to me and this thing, I'm not a balabais. Right? So the shaila is there a place in Torah for a person to say that I'm so sick that I've lost control? So I've heard Rabbonim say that the very label of addiction is against the Torah. I've heard Rabbonim say it. That the very word addiction is Hepech HaTorah, because when you say that a person is an addict, you say that the person is no longer a Baal Bechira, has no free will. And you cannot say about a Yid that there's no Bechira Chavshis. It's a godly gift. That person is about, hey, Nahodam, but I disagree. I believe that in the Tanya there's clear Hechacha for the idea of addiction. Right here. A Rosh Hashanah is an addict in one thing. A Rosh Hashanah means that in one area of my life, I have lost control. For one person it's this, for another person it's something else. And a person who is a Rosh Hashanah, Moyach Shaltal is not going to work. If a person has done something wrong, Moyach Shaltal can prevent him from doing it again. But if a person has done something wrong so many times, that the Tanya categorizes him as a Rosh Hashanah, and our Rebbe says, a Rosh Hashanah doesn't mean he did Aveda once. No. A Rosh Hashanah doesn't mean a Rosh Gomor has only Avedas. No. A Rosh Hashanah is in between. It's a unique category. It's almost a borrowed use of the word. Rosh Hashanah means I've done something wrong until I become that wrong thing. I've done something wrong when it comes to this thing. I've lost control. This is an addict. This is an addict. And an addict has to heal. And until he heals, he can't control himself. And the Rebbe says, if a person has descended into this category, which is called Rosh Hashanah, he cannot return. Let's read the words inside. Why should I just lecture? Yeah, I'm going back. Might as well read. We're on page Chav Gimel Amud Aleph. That means that's 20. What is it? 40? 45. Right? 45. How many lines down is it? Imloi mi. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 lines into the page. Beginning of the line. Imloi. We're talking about Me'ech Shalt Al Alev. And we're talking about Me'ech Shalt Al Alev, even the Madrega of Abyssal Yiddish house. And we're saying that that's enough to be a Beinani, Imloi, unless Mishu Rosh Hashanah. If a person is called a Rosh Hashanah. Now, what's the pilpul here? What's a Rosh Hashanah? What's a Rosh Hashanah? Al Pi Halacha, a Rosh Hashanah is the person who has 51% of Avedas, is a Rosh Hashanah. Al Pi Tanya, what's a Rosh Hashanah? One Aveda makes it a Rosh, no? So the Rebbe, no. That's not Rosh Hashanah, that's Rosh. But on the other hand, some of the Mashpiyim taicht. I saw it for the Mashpiyim. The Rosh Hashanah means Rachman V'tzlan Rosh Gomor. The definition of a Rosh Gomor is that he has no charata, he has no Jewish guilt, he has no regret. That means that's also not right. So we're not going to teach Rosh Hashanah like the Shem HaTorah and Tanya one Aveda. We're not going to teach Rosh Hashanah somebody who has no mitzvahs whatsoever, he has no Jewish conscience. So what's a Rosh Hashanah? A Rosh Hashanah means I did the Aveda so many times until now when it comes to this Aveda, I'm no longer a Balabais. That's how the Rebbe explains. It's a unique, it's a different category, and it's for one Aveda. A person who's a Rosh Hashanah when it comes to food is not a Rosh Hashanah when it comes to Shabbos. He's not a Rosh Hashanah when it comes to film. He's not a Rosh Hashanah when it comes to making brachas. It's a moment of Avedech. In one way, I'm not a Balabais of myself. So he says, Imrei Mishu Rosh Hashanah. If a person's in the category of Rosh Hashanah, Kemai Merazal, and he explains what's a Rosh Hashanah. It's what says in the Medrash. A Rosh is controlled by his heart. And they're not a balabais over their heart. So we're not talking about a person, the person may very finely is in one area of his life. There's one thing, and the way this happens is Ova Vishona, Chozer Vishona. Nas like you do the same Aveda again and again. In Derech Chaim, it's called Prikaso. It's not the Pshat. I know it's wrong and I do it. It's the pshat. When it comes to this, I don't have the conscience that it's wrong. A poyra koil is not a poil mamish. A poyra koil is a yimahusi. that when it comes to this Aveda, I have no yoke. So the Alter Rebbe says, if a person is that Maimed Matziv, and he continues, this is a punishment, I'll go to the Oitel Avodah because of the greatness of the Aveda. Now, what's the Pshat? What does it mean? That if a person did an Aveda many times, he's called a Rasha Be'emes, and it's a Oynesh, a Godel of Eitzn Aveda. So I'll tell you the answer. I'll tell you the marker of this. The marker of this is a Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva. What does the Rambam say in Hilchos Tshuva? The Rambam has a kash. The Rambam speaks about free will. Free will. So one of the things which bothers the Rambam about free will is the Va'avodim v'inu eisam arbe me'eshana v'gam asav goya she'avedu dononech. The Eibusha says Yidden are going into Golos. And in Golos they're going to be enslaved and they're going to be made to work hard. And there's going to be a nation which is going to cause Yidden all kinds of tzaddis. And then, after 400 years, Yidden are going to come out of Golos. And we're going to come out of Golos aus der Wissen zu sein, erstens, Rechush Gadol. Right? They're going to take along Valdika Ashirus, Rechush Gadol. Zweitens, in addition to the Rechush Gadol, they're going to take along the nation that's going to punish the Yidden is going to be judged. Frag the Rambam, Hashefet kol ha'oretz lo yaseh mishpat. The Eibush has no fairness. The Eibush that makes the Mitzrayim punish the Yidden. Because somehow, Yidden is going into Golos as a necessary prerequisite to Matan Torah. So the Mitzrayim are doing a mitzvah. The Eibush that wants Avraham Avinu's children to become his nation. In order for the whole nation of Israel to become the Eibishtas, they have to go through the Korah Barzel, the melting pot of Mitzrayim. Someone's got to do it, huh? Someone has to do it, and then you punish them? Where's the fairness? Where's the equity? So there's different pratim. The Rambam asks this kasha, and the Rambam gives a teret, and the Ravid gets very nervous, and the Rebbe has l'chut sichas on the Rambam, and on the Ravid. One of the things that the Rambam says is that every individual Mitzri had bechira chavshis. The nation of Mitzrayim had to punish the Jews, but not you could be your neighbor. So the Ravid says, no, what happens if every single Egyptian decides that he's not going to do it? If the Eibush says someone's got to do it, so someone's got to do it. If someone's got to do it, you have to say there's some loss of free will. The Rebbe asks a better kasha. The Rebbe's kasha is, you can say that an individual Egyptian has a breda not to enslave the Jews. But the king of Egypt, he's only one man. And he's the governor of the whole state. If he says no is no, if he says yes is yes. How could you say about the king of Mitzrayim that he has free will? If the Eibishter wants Yidden to suffer Mitzrayim, the king has to have in his chakmalay. Has to be his idea. So the Eibishter is making this king sin. A punishment. So this becomes a whole pill from the Rambam how to explain it. Of course, one of the truths is you have to enslave the Jews. Nobody ever said you had to enjoy it. Another explanation says you have to enslave the Jews, but no one said you had to be mahader b'mitzvah, and the Mitzrayim did it mahader and mina mahader. It's all kind of truths. But there's one more aspect to this whole parsha. And the other back to this whole parsha is Pashat Psukim and Chumash. That when Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu about Makas Dam, you bring Makas Dam, and the Mitzrayim should let Yidden go, and of course they don't need to go. So it says in the pasuk, "Vayichbat Parei Yaslibe, v'hachbat Yaslibe." Parei makes his heart hard, meaning to say he just got a punch in the nose and in the stomach on a Beider Zayden, and he's bruised and he's doubled over and he's in a lot of pain. But no, I'm not letting the Yidden go. Then comes Makas Tzvadeya, Makas is noch a Make, and he's mamish doubled over. He got some tzad and pushed in his belly. They went down. And v'hachmat is liebe, action sich nicht not letting him go. But there's an interesting observation. The first 5 makkos, it says v'yichpat parei is liebe. Parei hardened his heart. The last 5 makkos, it says v'yichpat Hashem es liebe parei. After the 5th makkah, which is Orev, Parei had enough. No, the 5th makkah, the Deva. The 5th makkah was Deva. After Deva, Parei had enough. So Parei didn't have the koyach to be in action. So the Eibishter gave him akshonis for 5 more makkos. For Shchin and for Borod and for Arbe and for Cheshach until makkos b'chedus. So the Rambam says to the Beit Shalom, over here you for sure don't have free will. However, you're going to explain how the nation has free will, even though it says, Ger Yezarach Avodum. However, you're going to explain how the Melech Mitzrayim has free will, even though the king has to pass off, has to sign off on this Avdus. Otherwise, Yidden can't be enslaved. But when it says Befedish Nechumish that Pari is exhausted, and he has no more koyach to enslave the Jewish people, and then the Eibishter makes his heart hard for 5 more makkos. Where's the fairness here? So on this, the Rambam says the same word to the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe takes from this Rambam. That's a part of the Einish. First of all, you have to answer the kasha. Second of all, you have to answer the kasha how Melech Mitzrayim has bechira chavshis. When it comes to the last 5 makkos, where Pari is exhausted, he can't fight anymore. From himself wants the Yidden to leave, but the Eibishter wants 10 makkos. If they see with Shenis or Mishunis, Veistach, the Veis Meif Sai Be'eretz Mitzrayim. So that you should know, all the things that the Eibishter, the 10 makkos was the Eibishter Shalom Aleichem Telemazi. You should know that there's a God. So the Eibishter hardens Parei's heart, and then he punishes him for not letting them go after Makkos Chin, and after Makkos Bored, and after Makkos Arbe, and after Makkos. What's the pshat? He did so many Avedas before that now he was punished that he shouldn't have Bechira. And for the Avedas without Bechira, he's also punished. And that's what the Rambam says this. I'm not making this up. Azei steht in Rambam. And the Alter Rebbe is quoting this Rambam. If a person does an Aveda, he has to do tshuva. If a person does an Aveda a second time, he has to do tshuva. If a person does an Aveda so many times that he becomes a Rosh Behemis, now he's going to do another Aveda. He's no longer a Balabayis. And it's an Einish. It's a punishment. And if you could almost say it's a self-inflicted punishment. In other words, I don't want to go into the whole chemistry and psychology of an addict. You don't become an addict from one time. You become an addict nougat many times. And when you cross that threshold, you're now in a situation where you're called sick. You have no self-control when it comes to this inyan. It's because before, when you did have self-control, you indulged. And it's an einish. That's the type of these words. So the Alter Rebbe says a person does an Aveda so many times that he has a hergel ra, he has a bad habit. He lost his chush. Moyach shalot ala leiv. Abyssal the Yiddish heart is not going to win. It's every time you meet people who have weaknesses, addicts, and you'll tell them, you have a problem, you should go do a treatment center, you should join a program. He says, no, if I wanted, I could stop. I just don't, if I wanted, I don't have to drink. If I wanted, I don't have to. If I want it, and everybody knows it's a sheker, most of all he himself. Why? Because he cannot stop. And this is Tacha B'Niseicha Mavdila and B'Neicha and B'Nelekecha. So the Alter Rebbe says a person who's crossed over this threshold, Moyach Shalat Alaleiv is not good. It's not strong enough. And again, I don't know. But I think when the Alter Rebbe says Moyach Shalat Alaleiv is not strong enough, it's only talking about Abyssal Yiddish Shahatz. If a person has real Ava V'Yideh, I think real Ava V'Yideh is stronger than any addiction. But if a person is a Maimed U'Matzah where he doesn't have full Ava V'Yideh, he has a Bissel Yiddish Shahatz, he has a good feeling towards Avodas Hashem, through his learning and through his contemplation. In that thing, in that area, where he's Rosh Beyemes, it's not strong enough. A good attitude, a good inspiration can work for things which I'm relating to in a middle way. When it comes to things where I'm so vulnerable and I'm so weak and I'm so exposed and I've developed a bad habit, good feelings are not enough. Wait, but that's not the end. Let's go weiter. Well, the Torah is not speaking about these people that are called Mesim, Shebachayim, Kriya Mesim, during their lifetime they're called Mesim. This part of Chamacham B'Kitzur. Ki be'emes, because the truth of me talking about such people, it's impossible for a Rosh Lamed Hashem to serve the Eibishter. And again, here we're saying the gather of Rosh Beyemes. Person doesn't have Aveda one time, he has to do tshuva. But if he didn't do tshuva yet, it doesn't mean that it can't be a Benini going forward. But person doesn't have Aveda many times. Until he falls into this category of Rosh Beyemes, he cannot continue serving the Eibishter. Right? Mebli. Such a person has no choice but to do tshuva for the past first. Meaning to say, when a person has a bad hergel, a person has a bad habit, He can't just say, I'm going to go on living. He has to break the bad habit. And breaking the bad habit requires tshuva. And tshuva is an avodah. It's an intense avodah. In other words, it's sort of, I guess we're saying there's two levels of tshuva for an avodah. One person is doing tshuva for an avodah, he wants to cleanse himself. One person is doing tshuva for an avodah, he doesn't want to be punished. One person is doing tshuva for an avodah because he wants that his avodah Hashem should be as possible, as much as possible, as perfect as possible to do tshuva. Another person has to do tshuva because he cannot go on. He cannot serve the Eibishter because yesterday's avodah is not letting me serve the Eibishter today. And this is what Alter Rebbe finishes Perek Yedzayin. Such a person is not in a position to serve the Eibishter. Unless Shayasu Tshuva the Tshuva for the past first. L'shaber klipes, to break the klipes. Sheimosach mavdu, which are a curtain which separates. Umachitza shel barzel, an iron curtain. Hamafsekes, which separates between the person Laviyam Shabashamayim and the Father in heaven. Again, and in Perek Chavav he brings the pasuk. Kamesha Kosach, Kamesha Nemar, Aveinei Sechem Avdilen, Beinech Lebein Elkechem. An Aved is a wall between you and your own godliness. And this seems to be, I hate to use this word, it seems to be a pshara. The klal, a person does an Aved, he has to do tshuva. But when do you say that a person does an Aved, he can't go weiter unless he does tshuva? This is when he's in the Maimed Matzah, which Alter Rebbe is calling Rosh Hashanah. And what is tshuva? What is tshuva? So he continues. You have to break your heart. That's the pasuk. That's a bracha. You're learning again such tshuva. In Perek Zayin, the Alter Rebbe gives the protocol. The seder of doing tshuva is in Tanya Perek Zayin. You get such tshuva. First of all, you have to be explaining in the neshama. You think about the neshama, and you have to be me'eder rachamim rabim on the neshama. That's the first thing. And the second thing is you have to think about the aveda, and the aveda has to make you feel broken. And this is the point that the Alter Rebbe is talking about here. Shviras libe, to break the heart. Umeriras nafsh achatov, and to be bitter in his nefesh because of the avedas. Kamesha kosel bezeh, it's in the zeh, the pasuk, zivchei elokim. And I spoke about this at length in an earlier cast. The only time it says by a korban, Shem Elokim, is by Yisrael. Vayovei Arei, V'chol Ziknei Yisrael, Lechol Lechem Emcheisen Meish Lefnei Elokim. So it says in the Rishonim, this was korbanos. And the Rishonim also say, when Yisrael brings a korban, it's the Shem Elokim. When a Yid brings a korban, when a Kohen brings a korban, it's always the Shem Havayah. When do you have by a Yid a korban the Shem Elokim? Tshuva. Karbonos are always the Shem Havayah. Karbonos help for shgogis, for mistakes. Aveda is not by mistake. Tshuva, which is an Aveda done on purpose, this is the korban the Shem Elokim. Zivchei Elokim. When is a person bringing a korban, and the korban is called the korban the Shem Elokim? Ruach Nishbara, when he's breaking the spirit of Klippa. Ruach Nishbara means to break the spirit of Klippa. Leiv Nishbara gave by breaking one's heart. In other words, the avoida is I have to break my heart. The result of breaking my heart is I break the spirit. This ruach. Let's read weiter. Shayadei leiv nishba. This broken heart. Nishba ruach hatuma de sefer achra. Klippa owns me. Klippa owns me. Not in all areas of my life. In this area. In this one thing, Klippa owns me. How does Klippa own me? Because when it came to this one thing, I allowed myself until I crossed over to this space, which the Alter Rebbe calls the Rosh B'Yemes. The Taich Rosh B'Yemes is I'm no longer a balabayas. In other words, I believe that addiction is a pitera, and I believe addiction is a Tanya, and I believe that the 12 steps also is a Tanya. The 12-step program, which was made by a Christ, by a Goy, have a Yesod. There's a few Yesodas. The first Yesod is you can't do it by yourself. You need the Eibishter. And the second Yesod is that you're never cured. You're never cured. So some people say if it's never cured, they didn't have it, so we're going to invite it. Steht in Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, we yesterday said it in Shul, Al Tamin Ba'atzmach Ad Yom Meisa. Even a regular person should never trust himself Ad Yom Meisa. But then you have in Tanya, that when a person does an Aveda, he has to always remember it. Why? Because if he forgets about the Aveda, he's liable to do it again. You have to always be careful. I did an Aveda 20 years ago, and I did Tshuva Aveda 20 years ago, and the person says, I'm an alcoholic, I haven't had a drink. I remember being a boy of 14 years old, and a bacha from a Baal Tshuva program, who belonged to the 12-step program, was trying to explain to me the 12-step program. So he said to me, the man who founded this hasn't had a drink in 28 years. This he told me 40 years ago. And if you would meet him, he'd say, hello, my name is Bob, and I'm an alcoholic. So I said to him, I don't understand, you haven't had a drink in 28 years, what makes you an alcoholic? And the answer is, once an alcoholic, always not. The 12-step program is predicated on the day that you never cure. And there's a mock for it in a pasuk, and the ikid is a mocker for it in the tail of the Mezitcher Magid. And the emes is the Pirish B'Shnai Salam and Meshmein and Perok, which the Rebbe brings. What does the Mezitcher Magid? What does the Mezitcher Magid say? The Mezitcher Magid says like this, that the Gemara says, Al Yemer Adam I Efshe B'Fsar Chazir. A person should not say, I don't like treif. A person shouldn't say, ich hab nicht lieb, ich hab nicht halt, I don't like treif. Ela Yemer, he should say, Efshi, ich hab halt, I desire it, I want to do an Aveda. Aber ma said, what should I do? Sha'avi Shabashmayim, Gazer Alai, the Eibish is not allowed to have. A person shouldn't say, I hate treif. A person should say, I desire treif, but the Eibish doesn't let me. So what did the Mezitcher Magid say? That only a Beinin is allowed to say that. A Baal Tshuva is not allowed. If a person did a particular Aveda, and then he did Tshuva for that Aveda, Legabi that Aveda, he's never allowed to say Efshi. Why? Because that's an opening to fall back in. In other words, there's a raya to Mezitcher Magid, for the Tedas HaMagid, that when a person falls into a certain Aveda, for the rest of his life, when it comes to that thing, he has to say I'm an addict, has to say I'm a drunk, an alcoholic. So I think there's a lot of rayas for the program, for the concept. What's the concept? If a person becomes a Rosh Hashanah, he has to do tshuva first. And after he does tshuva, for the rest of his life, he has to be on the defensive. His attitude has to be, I'm afraid of this, I have to stay away from this, I have to be careful from this, because Rahman al-Islam I can pull back in. This is what Al Rebbe is saying here. Okay, Nishbat with a broken heart, it breaks the stranglehold that Klippa has over the Aveda, and the person's, I want to tell you something, this is the Get to this man, you should know. It's Pashkocha Pratis. Between Pesach and Shavuos, I think this is a great word. Everybody's happy. The Misnagdim grow beards and the Chassidim learn Daf HaYomi. Isn't that good? The Misnagdim have beards and the Chassidim learn Daf HaYomi. I find it funny. I find it tasteful. And we learn Masechta Seita, right? The Welt let Masechta Shavuos. We learn Masechta Seita. Why Seita? So the Seita has Mem Tes Daf, has 49 Daf. Daf Layom. But Shavuos also has Mem Tes Daf. So first of all, between me, you, and the lamppost, Shavuos is a very hard Masechta. Shavuos is a Yeshivish Masechta. Seita is not a particularly hard Masechta. But I don't think that that's the real reason. I think the real reason is because the carbon oimed is the only carbon which is made from barley. Carbon oimed is made from barley. All the carbonas are made from chitin and from silas, from wheat and zemel meal. I never met zemel, but zemel meal. Zemel, what's zemel meal? Zemel. Fine flour, white flour, purified flour, zemel meal. There's one exception. The carbon oimed, which you bring on Pesach, which is matir chodesh, is barley. Why? Because in Nisan there's no wheat. The wheat doesn't ripen till May, till after Pesach. So you have no bread. So they brought the carbon which they brought the second day Pesach, which is called carbon oimer, is the beginning of Sviras ha-oimer. You understand? You bring the carbon oimer and then you count the Svat B'Chamav Shabbos. It's after Seir. Vaket that says Aviv Kolu Bo'esh Geretz Carmel. The only way to bring the carbon oimer is the barley is so immature. You harvest the barley before Pesach and you roast it on an open fire to dry it out. And after it's dry, then you crack open the husks, you take out the kernels. They push it been baked dry, otherwise the pusher can't grind it. So the wheat, the barley is very immature. And you mark up a carbon oimer, which is Seirim. Now, everything in Nigla and in Pshat has a Chassidus. So what's the Chassidus? The Chassidus says that Se'idim is Meichel Behema. Barley is animal food. Barley is animal food. There's the halacha. Barley is animal food. So bringing animal food means that you have a shaykhus to a behema. What's the connection between Pesach and a behema? The answer is, on Pesach we were born as a nation. So the first day Pesach, Hashem made many miracles. He took us out of Mitzrayim, and we're celebrating, and we're freilach, and so on. What comes the next day? What comes the next day is our life before Yetzias Mitzrayim didn't go away. Before Yetzias Mitzrayim, we lived many years in Mitzrayim. And there were those years in Mitzrayim, maybe there's one or two things we did, we need to do tshuva for. So after Yetzias Mitzrayim, before Matan Teda, you have Sfiras Eimer. And Sfiras Eimer is tshuva, it's birut. That's why Chedesh Iyah is Rosh Hashanah, Ani Hashem Roifecha, because Refuah is tshuva. Today lo tshuva shemaviyah refuah liyayla. So this is the Chassidish reason, not the halachic reason and the practical reason. The Chassidish reason why carbon Eimer is so item, because it's tshuva. The only other carbon which is sa'idim is a saita. A saitis carbon is also sa'idim. There is such a thing as a minchas chayte. A person who sin brings the carbon mincha, but it's chitim. The only minchas chayte a person doesn't have edim and brings a carbon from sa'idim is a saita. So the Gemara says the lashon he asasa ma'isa behema yehei karbana meichel behema. So there's a connection between sfiras ha'omer and saita in the carbon and the pnimius of the carbon. The carbon is sa'idim because it has to do with the beater of a behema. The saita brings the carbon from sa'idim because she has a shaychas in a sa'idim from eichel behema. That's the connection. Yeah. So what's the next step? The next step is haraya saita bekulkula yazer atzmi min hayayin. After saita comes nazir. In Pashas, in Gemara there's nazir and then saita. But in Chumash it's saita and then nazir. And the Gemara says, what's the smuches? Why in Pashas Nosei, the longest Pasha in the Chumash, you have a Rabbi that keeps you busy for who knows how long? It's like 60, 80 psukim. You read Saita and then you read Nazir. Because if a person sees someone, Nachman Asad is Nishtal, in this Indian, he should not drink wine. Because everything is Ba'ashgocha Paratis. If you saw a person that because Harbi Yayin Oise, they drank wine, and wine makes a person shikah, and shikah makes a person weak, it gives take away a person's bad judgment, and they fell into this Aveda, you watched Seita B'Kulkula, so that's a simon that you have a shaychas to this Indian, so you should not drink wine. But to say it in the Lashon Lubavitch, you should be careful with the Gezerah that the Rebbe made about being shikas. And by Nazir it's written. By Nazir it's written. And the Gemara, I think it actually is also in the Chumash. S'cher amrinan l'nezira l'cham aloi sikra, which means in plain English, a person who has a problem with alcohol should not pass by a liquor store. If you know that on Kingston Avenue between President and Union Street there's a liquor store and you have a vulnerability for alcohol, walk on the other side of the street. Or don't walk on that street, walk on a different street. It's like a Gemara. This Gemara is the same idea. When a person fell into a maimed matzav, a vulnerability, you have to have a shmira. So what we're learning here in this Pedic is connected to the time. Because the time shows on a weakness which has to be healed, has to be remedied. And one of the aspects of healing this remedy is, in plain English, don't trust yourself. Don't say I'm a balabas. When it comes to this Indian, I got to stay across the street. I can't go any place near it because of a vulnerability, even after I do tshuva. But the Alter Rebbe says, in this Maimed Matzav, where a person is the Rasha Be'emes, he cannot continue serving Hashem and say, I'll do tshuva when I'll have time. He has to do tshuva first. Right, in English. A person has a weakness, he can live his life. A person is an addict, has to push it, stop his life and get treatment, because the addiction will destroy him, will destroy his wife, will destroy his children, will destroy his alles charav mach. A person has a weakness, we all have weaknesses. But when a person has a weakness, which the Teda says that he's no balabatashkeit over it, the Rasha B'Yemes, he has to do tshuva first. And that's what Alter Rebbe says. But then comes the Chiddush, skipping the bracket. V'bechinas tshuva tata. This is the lower tshuva. The hales heitato, to lift up the lower hay. La'akiman, if he lost it, to raise it up from where it's fallen. Shenaf al-chetzenu, which is fallen to klipa. And I'm not going to continue the Pedic. I'm just going to stop over here. Right? We know this. What's the difference between tshuva tato and tshuva ilah? We talk about this all the time. What's the difference between tshuva tato and tshuva ilah? Tshuva tato is about aveda. Tshuva ilah is about Hashem. Tshuva Allah means returning to the Eibush. When a person is thinking about the Eibush, then he's not likely to sin. So the traditional Seder is, our Rebbe has a totally different Seder, because we're living in a totally different time. But the traditional Seder is, first you do Tshuva Tata, and then you do Tshuva Allah. When a person is a Rosh Hashanah in one thing, he's what the Torah could call a mumit. In this one area, he has lost control. He has to do Tshuva. And the Chiddush is that when he'll do Tshuva, he'll regain control. You hear? He's never in control like he didn't sin, because he should say EFC. About Tshuva has to say EFC. So he never reaches so much control over himself that he never did that before. But he does Tshuva Tata. And Tshuva Tata helps that he heals. Tshuva Tata, without Tshuva Allah, Tshuva Tata helps that this person can be a Beinani again. The idea that he's a Rosh Hashanah, that he lost control, Tshuva Tata is enough to regain the chush to be able to serve the Eibishter. I don't know why the Alter Rebbe says Tshuva Tata, not Tshuva Allah. I have certain theories. I'm going to leave this alone. I'm going to stop right now. The Alter Rebbe says sometimes a person has to stop his life and do Tshuva. He cannot delay it when he's in the category of Rosh Hashanah. And when he does Tshuva, he regains that chush. At least he regains that chush enough that he should be able to serve the Eibishter going forward. And for this is enough Tshuva Tata. Okay, now I promise to start Perek Yud Ches. Perek Yud Ches starts off with a simple kasha. In order to be Mayach Shal Talalev, you have to have a brain that works well. Learning, for some people, is very easy and natural. And for other people, it's hard. Even if a person could learn, it's not to concentrate. Not everybody can concentrate so well. And even if a person could learn, and a person could concentrate, not everybody could feel. So what is a person supposed to do if he doesn't have a mayach, he doesn't have a lev, or doesn't have either? Now I don't mean he doesn't have mayach, there's no brain in his head. On a kop kamenish lev. His brain is not strong enough to learn an eifin of iyun. His brain is not strong enough to do his bonanus. His heart is not sensitive enough that he should feel. How is such a person supposed to serve the Eibishter? So Perek Yud Ches is going to start. The taste is beard. Tevas ma'et. The pasuk yikorav elach adava ma'et. Right? It says yikorav elach adava. It's near to you ma'oid very much. So the Rebbe says Perek Yud Ches. What if the other word ma'oid? That afilu mi. The ein loy hat nicht ken seichel to verstehen alakus. The ein loy leiv leheven do say baruch. He doesn't have the brain to learn. He doesn't have the heart, the heart to think, and then the heart to feel. He can be a Beinani using the technique that's going to be called the Mitzvah Hashem, Ava Misateris, Pintling it. And the Lashon Harav, Kafi Sheyazbaya Lakaman. We'll do this Mitzvah Hashem next week. Okay, good morning.